Young perpetrators of unimaginable horrors have been apprehended for their crimes, some showing remorse, others showing nothing close to remorse for their heinous crimes.
Get off my yo, that's what you can do. Get off my
Join us while we enter the chilling world where ruthless children exist.
That's unthinkable. 13-year-old boy can do that.
From the bully Eric Smith to the Bever Brothers, here are the 10 most feared kids in prison and where they are now. Number 10. The Bever Brothers. In the quiet town of Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, something sinister lurked behind the seemingly peaceful Bever family home. On a summer night in July 22, 2015, the neighborhood was about to witness a horrific event that would leave them in shock and disbelief. Little did the neighbors suspect the chilling horrors that were about to be unleashed within the confines of a seemingly idyllic household. It was a night that would forever shatter the illusion of safety and leave the community in a state of shock and disbelief. David and April Beaver, the parents of 7 children, presented themselves as just another suburban family, residing in a quiet neighborhood where children played in the streets and neighbors exchanged pleasantries over white picket fences. But behind closed doors, a sinister plan was slowly taking shape, concealed from prying eyes and festering within the minds of 2 brothers. On the fateful evening of July 22, 2015, a darkness descended upon the Beaver Brothers, 18 years old Robert and 16 years old Michael. With hearts consumed by a disturbed fascination with mass killings, they meticulously crafted their plans, drawing inspiration from notorious figures like the Columbine high school shooters. Armed with knives and other weapons, the brothers embarked on a path of unspeakable violence. Methodically and ruthlessly, they executed their plan, targeting their unsuspecting family members, starting with their parents. The tranquility of the night was shattered by the screams and cries of their victims, echoing through the once peaceful household. Imagine the fear of their parents, David and April, who fell victim to the brutal onslaught, their lives cruelly extinguished by their own flesh and blood. 3 younger siblings met a similarly tragic fate, their innocent lives cut short in a horrifying display of fraternal malevolence. This makes a total of 5 family members killed that night. Before the death of 12-year-old Daniel, he mustered up courage with trembling hands and dialed 911 with his voice quivering with despair and desperation. His bravery didn't save him, but it saved his 2 other siblings, 2-year-old Autumn, who wasn't hurt at all, and 13-year-old Crystal, who miraculously clung to life, her body bearing the scars of the unimaginable horrors from a slit throat and multiple stab wounds she had endured. The 2 suspects fled the scene through the back door of the house when police arrived and headed into a wooded area behind the property. They were apprehended quickly with the use of a K-9 unit and arrested without incident. One of the brothers spontaneously uttered that plans for the killings were stored on a flash drive inside the home. This flash drive was later retrieved by police when they searched the home for a second time. They also recovered computer equipment and video surveillance cameras, which they believed recorded the murders as they were located near where 3 of the victims' bodies were found. It was later determined that the brothers planned to make 2 videos, one depicting the bodies of their family that would be shown to investigators and prosecutors, the other without the bodies that could be posted online. The brothers, their once twisted plan now laid bare, their facade of normalcy forever shattered. The investigation that followed revealed a web of troubled family dynamics and a haunting history of disturbing behavior, leaving the community reeling from the revelation that evil has many faces, even within the confines of a seemingly ordinary household. As the legal proceedings unfolded, the community and the nation watched with bated breath, seeking answers, seeking justice. The courtroom became a stage where the depths of human depravity were laid bare, where the surviving siblings stood as witnesses to the unimaginable horrors they had endured. The brothers, deemed competent to stand trial, faced the consequences of their heinous acts. In a moment that held the collective breath of a nation, Robert Bever, consumed by the weight of his guilt, pleaded guilty to all charges. Authorities have called the killings the worst single criminal event in Broken Arrow history. The brothers were charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of assault and battery with intent to kill. On August 9, 2018, authorities announced that Michael Bever would be charged as an adult. He was condemned to a life sentence without the possibility of parole, to spend his remaining days within the cold confines of a prison cell. Michael Bever, a mere juvenile at the time of the crime, faced a different fate, his sentencing allowing for the possibility of parole. The Bever family tragedy left a scar on Broken Arrow, a community unaccustomed to such depths of darkness. It was a harsh awakening, a chilling reminder that beneath the surface of tranquility, the seeds of horror can take root. Number 9. Mary Bell. In the cold December of 1968, 2 girls who lived next door to each other did something hideous that you wouldn't believe a child could think of. That December, Mary, aged 11, and Norma, 13, stood before a criminal court in Newcastle, accused of strangling 2 little boys, 4 years old Martian Brown and 3 years old Brian Howe. But after the hearing, her accomplice Norma was acquitted of all charges because there was nothing to hold on to her. Let's take a step back before the court hearing. Born on May 26, 1957, in Newcastle upon Tyne, England, Mary Bell's troubled childhood was marked by neglect, abuse, and exposure to violence. Her mother, Betty McCricket, was a sex worker with a history of criminal behavior. Mary faced severe neglect and witnessed her mother's clients engaging in violent acts. Maybe this factor played a role in what she turned out to be. Mary committed her first killing when she was just 10 years old. She did this by luring her victim, a 4-year-old boy named Martin Brown, to an isolated place and informed him that he had a sore throat, which she would massage. However, she ended up strangling him. His lifeless body was found in an abandoned house. A few weeks later, Mary and Norma claimed another victim. Brian Howe, a 3-year-old, was strangled, and his body showed signs of mutilation. After her second victim, the police became suspicious, and an investigation was launched. Mary and Norma were eventually arrested and brought to trial for the murders after all evidence pointed to them. The court proceedings were highly publicized due to the age of the accused and the gruesome nature of the crimes. The crime was so gruesome that it made headlines for years. Mary was only 11 years old during the trial, and her behavior during the trial was peculiar. She displayed a lack of remorse and often acted indifferently, which drew attention to her troubled mental state. Despite her age, the court found her guilty of manslaughter. Mary Bell was sentenced to an indefinite period of detention. She spent several years in various institutions receiving psychiatric evaluation and treatment. Over the years, her sentence evolved, and she was eventually released on parole in 1980 at the age of 23. Mary has since been granted lifelong anonymity, with court orders protecting her identity. She is living a private life, away from the public eye, to shield her from potential harm due to the notoriety surrounding her case. 4 years after her release from custody, on 25th of May 1984, Mary gave birth to a daughter, her only child. Her daughter knew nothing of her mother's past until 1998, when reporters discovered Mary's then current location in a resort town on the Sussex coast. This media revelation forced Mary and her daughter to leave their home and be driven to a safe house by undercover officers. Mary and her daughter later relocated to another part of the United Kingdom. That same year, Mary collaborated with author Gitta Sereni to provide an account of her life before and after her crimes for Sereni's 1998 book, Cries Unheard: The Story of Mary Bell. Mary details the abuse she suffered as a child at the hands of her prostitute mother, whom she describes as a dominatrix, and, she alleges, several of her mother's clients. The book contains every aspect of her life. Mary's current whereabouts are unknown and remain protected by the 2003 High Court order. Number 8. Jasmine Richardson. Imagine being only 12 years old and getting involved in a crime that would shake up your whole community. That's the story of Jasmine from the Richardson family. How did a regular family end up facing such a terrible situation, and what could make a 12-year-old do something so awful? The Richardson family seemed ordinary, residing in a suburban neighborhood of Medicine Hat, Canada. Mark and Deborah Richardson were parents to an intelligent and seemingly typical 12-year-old girl named Jasmine. However, beneath the surface of normalcy, a storm was brewing. waiting to unleash its devastation. On the fateful night of April 22, 2006, the Richardson family home became the scene of a horrifying crime. Jasmine, influenced by her older boyfriend, 23-year-old Jeremy Steinke, embarked on a gruesome mission that would lead to the murder of her parents and younger brother. The motive? A toxic mix of rebellion, forbidden love, and a desire for a life free from parental constraints. Wait, let's take a step backwards. A 12-year-old child dating a 23-year-old man? Now, what exactly caused the death of Jasmine's parents? According to friends of Jasmine, Richardson's parents had grounded her for dating Steinke because of the age disparity. Her friends had also criticized their relationship. According to friends of Steinke, he told them he was a 300-year-old werewolf. He allegedly told his friends that he liked the taste of blood and wore a small vial of blood around his neck. He also had a user account at the vampirefreaks.com website where he met Jasmine, who lied on her profile to be 15. But they actually met at a punk rock show in early 2006. Jasmine's relationship with Jeremy Steinke was an alarming factor that played a pivotal role in the tragedy. Because Jasmine wanted to freely date Steinke and their parents wouldn't approve, Jasmine and her self-proclaimed werewolf boyfriend planned on how to overcome her parents' objections and continue their relationship. She came up with the idea of killing her parents, and Steinke agreed, suggesting they needed a solid plan. On the night before the murders, the young couple watched a movie called Natural Born Killers, and the next day, on 23rd of April 2006, they carried out their plan. Steinke broke into the house and brutally murdered the family. Jasmine just allowed the whole event to unfold. Jasmine's little brother was also killed by Steinke because he was a witness to their crime. In the aftermath of the murders, the legal system faced the challenging task of determining the appropriate course of action for a 12-year-old perpetrator. Canada's criminal justice system does not permit the prosecution of individuals under the age of 12, and Jasmine fell within this age bracket. This presented a complex moral and legal dilemma: how to hold a young child accountable for such a grave crime while considering her age and potential for rehabilitation. In May 2016, Jasmine's sentence was completed, and she was freed of any further court-ordered conditions, restrictions, or supervision after a final sentence review on May 6, 2016. Steinke admitted to the murder of the Richardsons. He was tried in November 2008 and found guilty by a jury on 3 counts of first-degree murder for the killings of the 3 Richardson victims. On December 15, 2008, Steinke was sentenced to 3 life sentences, 1 for each first-degree murder count. Number 7. John Venables and Robert Thompson. The murder of James Bulger on February 12, 1993, sent shockwaves through the United Kingdom, revealing a harrowing and disturbing incident that would forever scar the nation's collective conscience. The perpetrators, John Venables and Robert Thompson, both aged 10 at the time, committed a crime so heinous that it defied the comprehension of a society grappling with the implications of such malevolence in such young minds. James Bulger, a 2-year-old toddler, was abducted from the New Strand shopping center in Bootle, Merseyside, by Venables and Thompson. The 2 boys, skipping school, embarked on a chilling journey that would culminate in tragedy. Surveillance cameras captured the chilling images of James being led away by the boys, an innocent child in the clutches of malevolent intent. Venables and Thompson subjected James to unspeakable acts of violence at a remote railway embankment. The brutality of their actions was inconceivable, and the details that emerged during the trial would forever be etched into the minds of those who followed the case. The extent of James Bulger's suffering became a grim testament to the darkest corners of human capacity, especially when wielded by such young hands. The 2-year-old was brutally assaulted and beaten, and then, to stage their crime, they left James's body for the train to put a finishing touch, which tragically their plans worked. The discovery of James's lifeless body on the railway tracks sent shockwaves through the nation. The innocence of childhood was shattered by an incomprehensible act of brutality, and the tragedy elicited an outpouring of grief, anger, and soul-searching. How could 2 children, barely into their own lives, commit such a horrific crime against another child? The subsequent trial of John Venables and Robert Thompson marked a watershed moment in legal history. For the first time, the British public confronted the disturbing reality that children could be capable of such extreme violence. The proceedings were held behind closed doors to shield the young defendants from the intensity of media scrutiny. As the details of the crime emerged during the trial, the public grappled with a profound sense of disbelief and horror. The court, in a historic move, found Venables and Thompson guilty of the abduction and murder of James Bulger. However, the verdict posed a profound question about responsibility and rehabilitation. How does a society reckon with children who commit acts so monstrous? The legal system, facing uncharted territory, delivered a sentence that balanced the need for justice with the acknowledgement of the offender's age. Venables and Thompson were sentenced to be detained at Her Majesty's pleasure, a term that allowed for their incarceration as long as necessary. This verdict reflected a commitment to addressing the heinous nature of their crime while recognizing the potential for rehabilitation inherent in youth. The James Bulger case left an indelible mark on the legal, social, and psychological landscapes of the United Kingdom. It prompted a reevaluation of how society understands and deals with juvenile offenders, leading to changes in the legal system's approach to such cases. Number 6. Lionel Alexander. In 2001, 14-year-old Lionel Alexander was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the death of 6-year-old Tiffany Unick. He was the youngest person in the United States to be given that sentence. Let's go back to where it began. It all started on July 28th of 1999 in Pembroke Park, Florida, when Lionel's mother, Kathleen Grossett Tate, was asked to watch Tiffany for the evening. Kathleen and Tiffany's mother had grown up together in Jamaica. When the children were watching TV, Kathleen decided to go upstairs for the evening. She yelled downstairs for them to quiet down at about 10 p.m., but did not check on them at that time. It was around 40 minutes later Lionel Tate went upstairs to get his mother and told her that little Tiffany Unick wasn't breathing. Lionel Tate, who weighed in at 10 kilograms, claimed he was simply wrestling with little Tiffany, who wasn't up to 3 times his weight. He told his mother he had her in a headlock when she smashed her head on the side of a table. He then described her as rolling around on the floor, crying, acting like a baby, and urinating in her pants. A third of his size, Tiffany would have been no match for Lionel, play fighting or not. The question is, was Lionel a violent child who had attacked the little girl, or was he just a kid who had tried to imitate the wrestling moves he saw on TV without realizing how dangerous they were? Some experts say there is absolutely no way that this was simply a kid imitating wrestling moves. This was a devastatingly brutal beating, one that left poor Tiffany with a total of 35 injuries. Tiffany had a cracked skull, a broken rib, a lacerated liver, hemorrhaged kidneys, bleeding in her brain, and dozens of bruises on her little body. Prior to the murder, Lionel had been suspended from school 15 times. He had also exhibited other behavioral problems, including stealing, lying, and fighting. Does part of the blame then fall on his mother for ignoring her son's previous behavior and leaving him alone with a 6-year-old child? In 2001, Lionel Tate went on trial for Tiffany Unick's death. It was determined that he would be tried as an adult for first-degree murder. It took the jury 2 weeks of deliberation to come back with the verdict: guilty of first-degree felony murder. The crime carried a mandatory sentence of life imprisonment without a chance of parole. Tears rolled down Lionel's cheeks as he was handcuffed and led out of the courtroom after his sentence was handed down. Lionel Tate would get a second chance, though. In 2003, an appeals court threw out his conviction on the basis that he wasn't given a mental competency hearing prior to his trial. Lionel then pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, and the state chose not to retry him. Instead, he was given the deal he had turned down 3 years prior. He was credited for the 3 years already served in a juvenile facility, which was to be followed by a year of house arrest, 10 years probation, 1,000 hours of community service, and mandatory counseling. In January of 2004, Lionel walked out of jail a free man, albeit with a monitoring device attached to his ankle. Lionel would not make the most of his second chance. In September of 2004, Lionel was discovered by police outside his home with a knife. The judge extended his probation to 15 years. In May of 2005, he was charged with armed robbery, armed burglary with battery, and violating his parole in connection with the robbery of a pizza man at gunpoint. The pizza man identified Tate as the one who had pointed a gun at him. Lionel faked psychological issues to avoid a court hearing, but in the end, he was found competent to stand trial. In May of 2006, he pled guilty to gun possession, which violated his probation. Lionel was sentenced to 30 years imprisonment. What a foolish way to use second chances. Now it's time for our subscribers' pick. Here is a picture of a bold but obviously scared child with chains and shackles faced by a tough judge in a serious courtroom. The chains hold a story of a young life mixed up in a big mistake that no human should ever make. While the crime committed by some kids gives them the green card to be treated like an animal with shackles and chains on their neck and hand, this picture is just a photoshopped image by either an angry person who wants these gruesome, murderous kids treated like animals, or just a person playing with images online. It is important to know that the justice system doesn't support the brutal handling of any human. The handcuffs do a better job, don't you think? How do you think a serious situation regarding a minor should be handled? Let us know your take on this image in the comment section. Number 5. Eric Smith. Eric Smith gained notoriety for a heinous crime committed in 1993 when he was just 13 years old. Born on January 22, 1980, in Steuben County, New York, Smith's case shocked the nation and raised questions about the juvenile justice system. The incident occurred on August 2, 1993, in the town of Savona. Eric Smith lured 4-year-old Derek Roby into a wooded area, where he proceeded to brutally beat and strangle the young boy to death. The crime sent shockwaves through the small community and garnered significant media attention. During the investigation, Smith was identified as a suspect, and he eventually confessed to the murder. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry. I killed that little boy." Those are the words Eric Smith's grandfather remembered his grandson saying, after the family begged him to tell them what he saw on the day of Derek Roby's murder. Smith later confessed to law enforcement and provided details on how he killed the 4-year-old. His trial began in 1994, and he was tried as an adult. Smith's defense team argued that he suffered from mental health issues, including intermittent explosive disorder and constant bullying at school. Kids would call him freckled face and insult his teeth and glasses. Despite this, the jury found him guilty of second-degree murder. In January 1995, Eric Smith was sentenced to the maximum term allowed for a juvenile offender, a minimum of 9 years to life in prison. His case ignited debates about the appropriate punishment for juveniles who commit heinous crimes, particularly given Smith's age at the time of the murder. Throughout his incarceration, Smith became eligible for parole hearings. He went through several parole denials as authorities deemed him a continued risk to society. But on October 7, 2021, after being locked up for 28 years, Eric Smith was released from prison. His release was delayed for months until approved housing was found for him in Queens, New York. Smith will remain on parole for the rest of his life. Number 4. Alysa Bustamante. Elizabeth Olten was a 9-year-old who was murdered by her neighbor, Alysa Bustamante, who was 15 at the time, in St. Martin's, Missouri on October 21, 2009. Alysa, a troubled soul marked by the scars of a tumultuous upbringing, found herself entangled in a narrative that would forever stain the pages of true crime history. On October 21, 2009, when the autumn leaves whispered secrets that only the woods surrounding St. Martin's knew, Elizabeth Olten's dreams, as vibrant as the changing leaves, became an unwitting character in Alyssa's descent into darkness. The two girls were neighbors in the same community. On that fateful day, Alysa lured Elizabeth into the woods and strangled and stabbed her to death. Alyssa's only reason for murdering Olten was simply due to homicidal ideation and to see what it was like to kill someone. The aftermath unfolded like a nightmare. Alysa, driven by a compulsion to conceal her monstrous act, carefully buried Elizabeth in a shallow grave. Suspicion gripped the town like a vice, and the authorities, guided by an unsettling intuition, turned their gaze toward Alysa. Alysa's arrest on October 23, 2009, marked the beginning of a legal saga that would force the community to confront the darkness within its midst. She was indicted and pled guilty to second-degree murder and armed criminal action, and was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of conditional release in 2004 for second-degree murder. However, due to her additional conviction of armed criminal action, even if she is granted conditional release in 2024, she will have a consecutive sentence of 30 years in prison. This makes her earliest probable release in 2054, when she will be 60 years old. Number 3. Erin Campbell. Evil. Erin Campbell snatched 6-year-old Alicia MacPhail from her bed as she visited her dad and grandparents on the Isle of Bute, Scotland. The 16-year-old abducted, took advantage of, and murdered Alicia before dumping her body in woodland on the island. Alicia was later discovered face down and naked at the site by a member of the public. She had a total of 117 separate injuries. Campbell, who lived on the scenic and sparsely populated island, was found guilty of her abduction and murder by jurors. Judge Lord Matthews told the teenager he had committed some of the wickedest, most evil crimes Glasgow's High Court had ever heard. He was found guilty of the horrific crime and is currently serving a life sentence. Number 2. Joshua Phillips. Joshua Phillips was sentenced to life in prison for killing 8-year-old Maddie Clifton. Phillips was allegedly playing with a baseball bat at home in Jacksonville, Florida, when he struck Maddie in the eye, causing it to bleed. Phillips claimed he panicked, fearing his father's reaction, so he strangled her with a phone cord and stabbed her 11 times. He hid her body in the pedestal of his waterbed where his mother discovered it a week later. While the autopsy did not reveal any sexual assault, Maddie's body was found nude from the waist down. The murder appears to have been motivated by Phillips's fear of his abusive father, who would have been very angry had he found Maddie hurt at their house. Phillips, who had no history of violence, was charged as an adult with murder. He was found guilty of murder in the first degree and sentenced to life without possibility of parole. Number 1. Craig Price. Craig Price became known as the Warwick Slasher for his horrific crimes at a very young age. Craig Price had become a serial killer before the age of 16. Having killed 4 people in his Rhode Island neighborhood on the east coast of the United States. At age 13, in 1987, Price broke into the house 2 doors down from his own and stabbed 27-year-old Rebecca Spencer 58 times, killing her. Though he did not become a suspect in that case until he confessed to the murder 2 years later, after he went on to kill 3 other neighbors, while he was high on marijuana. His victims, a 39-year-old mother, Joan Heaton, and her daughters Jennifer, 10, and Melissa, 8, were stabbed over 30 times each. Their wounds were so deep that the handles broke off the knives, leaving the blades embedded in the victims. In court, Price nonchalantly mimicked the dying cries of the Heaton girls, displaying no emotion even as he related such disturbing details as biting the face of one of the victims as he stabbed her. Price refused a court order to undergo further psychological testing, fearing the results would be used to commit him for life. Instead, he was jailed for 25 years, but he has been displaying violent behavior behind bars, and this makes it unlikely he will ever be released. Thank you for watching this video. See you in the next one. Yeah.